Have you ever bought something and then had post-purchase regret? I'm not very good with money, and obviously running a tech channel, I like to buy things when I see them if they look pretty cool and I think they might be interesting to use or to make videos on. And unfortunately, making videos on things then leads to an excuse to buy more nonsense, which then sometimes leads to me to be disappointed with myself because I've spent too much money on things that then don't work out the way I wanted them to. I thought it might be fun to do a video of the things I've bought that I regret and the reasons why I regret them. I spent a lot of money on a lot of different things over the last few years, and so we're going to kickstart that off with the Azeron Cyborg, which, as you can see, is essentially a hand-shaped controller. Now, this, in theory, is a pretty nice device and a pretty funky one. You can personalize it and customize it, so you'll notice that it's got prawn written down the side of it, for example, and it's obviously shaped like a hand. Ergonomically speaking, it's pretty nice. You put your hand inside it, and you can see it's got a nice palm grip to it. I've done a separate video on this, obviously. And you can then access a multitude of buttons. They also have some really satisfying clicks to them when you do. You can push your fingers in different directions in the holes to basically press a series of different buttons. Now, in principle, this is actually a very nice thing. It's pretty expensive, but it's well designed. It's customizable in the build process, so you can customize this. For example, mine has glow-in-the-dark bits on here, and as well as my name on the side of it. And you can also then customize it in the software, where you can set which of the buttons do what. So this essentially replaces your keyboard. It also has a joystick on the side of it. All sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? And it is. The problem is I couldn't get used to it. And it's basically been sitting on the shelf ever since that period of time, just because my old brain can't cope with it. Got used to using a keyboard for so long, over a multitude of years, knowing what WASD does when playing games and other buttons, that you sort of get used to the habit of pressing those. So reprogramming my old brain to be able to cope with moving my fingers in different directions, because yes, you move your fingers in different directions on the keyboard, but this is like up and down, left and right, in and out. It's all over the place. Very satisfying and very cool. And potentially, I think if you could adjust your mindset really easily, so if you think you could train your brain, if you've got a younger one than mine, or you're just good at adapting to new things, then this is really, really funky and could be very comfortable. So if you've experienced any sort of problems with comfort on a keyboard, your hand sits in a more natural position. It feels like you're basically resting your hand in one place. You're not moving it around constantly. You're just moving your fingers in different directions. I think you probably find that it's a much more comfortable experience. But for me, it's a big waste of money, and it's now basically just a paperweight, which is a real shame. The next thing that I purchased, with all good intention, is Remarkable 2, which is actually inside a little folder at the moment. Now, Remarkable 2 is an e-ink device. This is basically a notebook. So it's pretty neat in that you can basically just turn it on, and then you can go into and make a series of notes. So you can just access these. You can see I've done some scrawling on here. And again, I've done a separate video on this. It comes with its own pen, which has like a pencil nib to it, and it allows you to write and draw and take notes and do other things. You can save the notes, you can share the notes. It's very clever in what you can do with it. Because it's e-ink, it lasts a while. Now, my process here was essentially I wanted to be able to make a to-do list or notes that I could easily access and had sort of within reach. I make a lot of videos and have a lot of plans to make more videos. And basically, I wanted something where I could easily take notes. I'm not a big fan, however, of having notebooks, written paper notes all over the place, a big extra mess. I'm pretty messy. If you could see behind the scenes right now, you'd see piles of boxes and other things. But I'm also terrible at just keeping on top of things. I've tried things like Todoist and Trello and all sorts of online boards to be able to manage that and keep on top of my to-do list that way. I actually ended up using Google Sheets of all things with a pinned tab in Chrome. But the intention here was to have something that was easy to access, that was on my desk, that I could just grab, write notes on, make a to-do list, you know, put my findings in it for review purposes, for example, that I could reference later on, and do other things like that. It just hasn't worked out that way. And it's just because I keep forgetting to use it, or it's in the way because it's quite big, so it takes up a bit of room on the desk, and then I just put it to the side, and then again I forget to use it when I need to, and then when I do, it's run out of battery and you've got to charge it up. The battery life's actually pretty good, as with any e-ink device, so that's not a problem. So the problem with it isn't the device itself is really cool and potentially really useful. If you love making notes on paper and having easy access notepad, then this is a pretty neat device, and I think a really good one because it replaces all that paper and it saves waste. It is expensive, but it is really good. But for me, it just doesn't work just the way it is. The other thing I got recently, and today's pretty fitting for it, is a massive air conditioner. It's huge. It's a Delonghi air conditioner, and I fully regret buying it. Now, British summers are short, and actually today it's raining, so perfect time to be doing this video. But I bought a massive air conditioner because it was getting really hot in my office. There are multiple lights on me at the moment. There's 2 up here, there's 2 over the other side of the room. Usually I've got a great big light for video purposes. I have to close the windows because of passing traffic noise when I'm doing voiceovers or I'm recording footage. And so it basically gets quite hot in here, especially in the summer. So when I'm building a PC and crafting something, I need it to be a bit cooler. So I wanted to buy an air conditioner, and hopefully one that would keep the room cool, but more importantly, be quiet. So I wanted to buy a premium one, spend a lot of money, did a bit of research, tried to find one that would be quiet. Delonghi's a well-known brand. I thought if I spent a lot of money on it, it would be nice and quiet, and I'd be able to run it, not pick it up on the microphone, keep the room cool so I wasn't pouring with sweat while trying to work on a PC, and have a better experience. I spent a stupid amount of money on it, but the idea was I figured if I bought a cheap one, post-purchase regret would be buy cheap, buy twice, or just buy cheap and end up with a really noisy thing. Instead, I've spent a lot of money and I've ended up with a really noisy thing. Also, stupidly, it's huge, which is an issue in 2 ways. One, the exhaust tube, which you're meant to run out of the window or out of a hole in your wall, is ridiculously short, which is why it's on the desk instead of on the floor. In an ideal world for me, it would be on the floor, the tube would run to the window, you seal the window up, or maybe you make a hole in your building, and then it would cool the room down. Now, this is a ridiculous first world problem, and if you're watching this in the US, you're probably laughing at me. Americans will have air conditioning. Us Brits don't tend to have air conditioning. We usually just open the windows and let the breeze blow through. Our summers are not that hot, but when they do get hot, they get pretty hot, especially indoors. The buildings aren't designed to cope very well, and it gets really toasty when you're also got the windows closed and PCs running, sometimes 2 computers in the same room at the same time, benchmarking. It just gets so hot. So yeah, fully regret that. Don't buy a Delonghi air conditioner because 1, it's too noisy, 2, it's too big, and 3, the pipe's too bloody short. So I've got to buy an extra pipe to be able to run that out the window. And now, when I'm thinking about doing that, it started pouring with rain anyway, in typical summer fashion. So that's British summer times for you. Fantastic. The next one is this Iconix A80, which I actually saw and purchased basically because it looked nice. I had a really funky design to it, but it also had a good number of features to it. Now, this is pretty old now in terms of the keyboard world anyway, because the new technology for keyboards is coming constantly, and I'm sure Iconix has got a better keyboard than this already. But it has all the things you'd expect: wireless, hot swappable key switches, and a nice design and potential for comfort and other things. It is a nice keyboard. It sounds nice, and you can swap out switches to make it even better, lube it up and other things. But I found the connectivity was a bit iffy, and also it wasn't as comfortable as I wanted. And despite my efforts, it's still a bit louder. Now, this actually leads on to another thing. Custom keyboards, this isn't really custom, but can get very expensive. And if you want to make them sound nicer, there's all the tricks for the various different things. You need to get a keyboard which has foam, and then the various different sort of plates and PCB designs and different switches and lubes and other things. It becomes expensive, and it's an expensive hobby to fall into. If anybody has looked into it, you'll know, and if anybody's done it, you'll probably hear people talk about how much money they've spent. You can spend up to $1,000, over $1,000 on a keyboard if you're customizing it enough, which is absolutely nuts. This is nowhere near that. This is basically an entry level into that sort of thing, but it ended up just not being very good. And so it's just ended up in the cupboard. But this actually speaks to one of the frustrations we have with this sort of thing with custom keyboards. If you're doing it regularly, I suppose if you're not, because I'm doing a lot of videos and dealing with a lot of hot swap switches, for example, I end up just breaking the switches. You'll notice over here, that I've got pots full of switches. This is actually just one of them, and I bought some switches, 5-pin switches. I just pulled this out. This is a perfect example. You won't be able to see Raul on camera, but you have 2 pins in there that connect for the connection to it, and I've bent one of them. And that's the problem with replacing the switches on the keyboard. And one of the issues I had with this keyboard, which probably led to me being annoyed with it in the first place, is when you're putting the switches in, it's really easy to bend the pins. And if you do bend the pins, then obviously the key's not working. And then you have to take the cap off and the key switch and basically replace that or fix it. You can rebend those pins out, straighten them out, and then put them back. So that is a possibility, but it's something you have to mess about with. And you don't really find that out until you've already done the whole keyboard, and then you start using it and find several keys on there just don't type anymore, which is the experience I had with that, and it's kind of frustrating with that. And then you do it again and again and again, and I've done it with other keyboards too. Case in point, K65 Plus Wireless from Corsair, which is currently my favourite, is the same sort of thing. This is has a number of nice features to it, including dampening foam, and it sounds really nice and it feels really nice, and it has custom design that allows you to do hot swap switches on it. But I also damaged a few of the pins on this while doing that, and now, for example, my minus key doesn't work, or the hyphen, which is causing a number of issues. I need to take that out and do it. I've been putting it off to the point where I've actually been copying and pasting minus sign a few times just because it was easier than trying to deal with a switch headache. So that's one thing to bear in mind. But that's really a first world sort of YouTuber problem, because if you're buying a custom keyboard and doing the switches, you probably aren't going to be doing it multiple times in multiple keyboards. So it's maybe less of an annoyance for the average person. The other thing that I really regret buying is the Herman Miller chair, which I bought a while ago. I've done a previous video on this, but it ended up causing me so much back pain. I suffered a lot with back pain over the years, and it hasn't got any better. In fact, over the last couple of years, it got a lot worse after I bought the Herman Miller chair. And, you know, you think buying an ergonomic chair from a company that's meant to be highly rated would improve the pain, but actually made it substantially worse to the point that I was in pain every day, all the way through the week. That's actually improved a lot lately since I got rid of the chair, which I'm glad to say. Now, obviously, I need to caveat this. Chairs are a very personal experience. Not everyone's going to have the same issues. You might find one that works for you and doesn't for other people. The one I'm currently using, for example, is very nice. It's got this weird adjustable sort of lumbar support that moves with you. It sits nicely into your back. It's got some nice padding on it. The arms are also really nicely padded and comfortable as well. But not everyone's going to find that the case. And there is one annoyance with this, in that the back of the chair squeaks sometimes and picks up on videos, which is why I've tried to be really still while making this video. It's a stupid thing. But the Herman Miller chair that I bought was £1,000, which is a lot of money. And I thought, I'm spending that much money on a brand that's well known with good reviews, it should be good. And it was initially, but then over a short period of time, it basically got quite bad. And then I ended up just being in pain all the time. And I can tell you that being in pain throughout the week, that thing gets worse and worse throughout the week. It's just not ideal. And it's just miserable. That's a miserable existence. So I wouldn't recommend it. The next one is my phone. Now, this is the Google Pixel 7 Pro, and I actually like this a lot, but I recently broke it, and it's not very obvious on camera probably. But while I was on holiday, of all places, I managed to shatter the screen. I pulled a plug out of the wall, don't ask me how. The metal bit flew across and hit the corner of the screen, which then shattered it, and it's cracked across in multiple different directions. A day later, Google announced the Google Pixel 9 and the 9 Pro and the 9 Pro XL. Having no self-control and loving new technology, and even justifying it to myself that I sometimes use my phone when I'm making videos, like if I've got a headset that connects to Bluetooth, for example, and I want to show that off, I thought, I'm going to buy that new phone just because I can't have a broken phone on camera, can I? I can't have a broken phone as a YouTuber. How does that look? I've resisted the temptation to buy it so far. Mostly because I haven't got a lot of money at the moment, and also because my wife was nagging at me not to do it and kept saying, don't you do it, because she knows what I'm like with money. The thing there is also, I feel like I would regret buying the new phone, because yes, the new phones are great. It's great having a new phone, isn't it? It's exciting and thrilling and whatnot, but it will basically be the same thing. The specs have changed a little bit, obviously, as they always do, and it will probably be faster due to planned obsolescence. Things always slow down on your phone, don't they? And I've got some frustrations with YouTube Studio not loading quick enough. But the thing that bothers me the most, I think, is the price. I feel like you're paying £1,000 now, over £1,000 for the Pixel Pro XL. I'd have to get the XL because the standard 9 is smaller than the Pro, or the standard Pro is smaller than the Pro here. There's Pro and Pro XL now, and the standard 9 Pro is smaller than the old Pro, which means I'd have a smaller phone, which would be annoying to pay more money for a device that was smaller. And also, I'm not on contract with my phone. I basically got a affordable contract, which is like £30 a month, but I'm not paying for the phone as well. So I not got a phone from the phone company. I bought the phone outright, and then I'm paying monthly for unlimited data and whatever the calls are. And that's just £30, whereas a standard contract is probably 60 and upwards if you also get a phone with it. So I don't want extra expenses every month. So buying the phone outright is more logical. But £1,000 is a big outlay for a phone. I've had this for a couple of years. I'm annoyed that I've damaged it, but it's done really well until that point. And I'm fighting the urge to buy a new phone, but it's a real first world problem, isn't it? It still works fine. It's just got this horrible crack in it and multiple splintering lines across there. The thing that bothers me is just how much money they are. I remember when they were £400 for a phone. I could easily justify £400 for a new phone. £1,000 is insane to me. You're talking like graphics card territory there, and that's insane as well. That's a different story, isn't it? Everybody knows that graphics cards are ridiculously expensive nowadays as well. So that's like a post-purchase regret that I know I'd have, so I'm sort of preempting that one. Sometimes it's sensible to know what your limits are and know that spending £1,000 on a phone that's only slightly different is not worth it. But it's still frustrating, and I still want it, so it's fighting myself to not have that. Anyway, hopefully a silly insight into some of the things that I've purchased over time. Not everything we buy is wonderful, and I'm sure you've got plenty. Let me know in the comments what your post-purchase regrets are. What have you bought that you hated, or it didn't work very well, or it didn't do what you wanted it to? I've reviewed quite a few things that I've really liked, some not so good as others, but this is like fully things that I bought that were just a waste of money, and now I just paperweights or just knock about not doing anything, but I don't really sell or move on with because I don't want to. I don't know what the reason is there. I suppose I could just sell those things. Anyway, this has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks very much for watching.